Not going to get that championship back by shaking hands, being best friends with the champion. No, I slapped him right in the stupid face. I slid out of the ring, and I let him know my intentions from that point.
He calls me down to the ringside, and we're starting to chat. He's just saying how I'm doing, all that. And then at the very end, he's like, "Hey, you got a match?" I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" He's like, "Yeah, you're gonna have a match." I was like, "That's not normal. Like, why?" And he's like, "You'll be fine. You're gonna do good. You're gonna wrestle Aleister Black. It's gonna be great." I was like, "All right, cool, yeah."
And now, your hosts of the Card Subject to Change podcast, for frequency's sake tag team champions of the world, the Wizard CZ, and never wrong, Nick Gold.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of the Card Subject to Change podcast, the podcast by the fan for the fan. We are powered by Low Pies Pizza, built by Durham Remodeling, and colored by Ryan Allison Tattoo. I am joined by my co-host, my co-tag champ of the podcasting network, the Wizard CZ. Wiz, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Nick. How about yourself?
Hey, not too bad. Before we welcome our guests, I just want to give a quick shout out to Absolute Pro Wrestling out of Waterloo. Put on a show in Well, they're not out of Waterloo. They were in Waterloo last night. Put on a show in Waterloo, and CZ and I took the 2-hour drive up and took in the show and want to thank them for putting on a classic show, a great show, and also thank them for the interactions afterward. We had a good time up there, didn't we, CZ? Absolutely,
and I love a good battle royal. That was the main event. That was a lot of fun to watch.
It absolutely was. Some twists and turns. They booked it pretty good. A lot of people left upset, but that's pro wrestling. Fans leaving either happy or upset, and they were definitely up in arms last night. But good job. I want to send a shout out to Jason Prentice and Brandon the Shank Eubanks for being welcoming us with open arms up there at the Cedar Valley Sports Complex in downtown Waterloo. Beautiful complex. You ever get a chance to see a show in that building, go for it. Great venue for wrestling. But that's enough about yesterday. A fun-filled day of wrestling for sure for the Card Subject to Change crew. We're talking about right now. We're going to get ripped. Not that way. Nope. No alcohol involved here. We're not going to get ripped that way. We're going to get ripped in a better way. We've got the one and the only Ript Studwell joining us here on the Card Subject to Change podcast. Ript, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. This is going to be a very fun time. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we've been looking forward to this one too. Due to circumstances we'll probably touch on later. We had you booked a long time ago and things just didn't work out. But now we got you back on the show and got you right where we want you to fire away some questions at Mr. Ript Studwell. And Ript, I'm going to start off the show like I do every other show. Spoiler alert, if you watch this show, we started off the same way every time. I'm going to ask you, Ript, what is it about pro wrestling that got you hooked? What keeps you coming back? What about pro wrestling is it you love so much?
It's definitely the storytelling. I'm a huge fan of stories and just interesting characters and stuff like that. And especially back when I first started, which was WrestleMania X7 was the first one that I'd ever seen, which is a great one to start out with because it's the consensus. It's a lot of people's consensus favorite WrestleMania.
It's amazing, yeah.
But yeah, like when you start out the show with William Regal drinking the tea that Chris Jericho pissed in. That is a great way to start your wrestling journey. And I was hooked from there. I love the match that they did too. It was great. It was not a long match. It was like 5 minutes, but there was just so much good stuff on that. Shane McMahon versus Vince McMahon was fantastic. Rock and Steve Austin, excuse me. That was phenomenal too. The TLC. I can't forget about that one. It was just, there's so many different flavors and that's what makes it so great, right? Like there's so much, the TLC is just this high flying extreme extravaganza. Then you have the comedy of Chris Jericho and Regal and this huge story of the main events. It's so good. I love the stories of it. And that's what keeps me coming back. Cause I love reading. I love anything that has a good story and a good heartbeat. It's so fun. That's what keeps me coming back for sure.
So safe to say.
Spoiler alert.
Oh, go ahead.
Spoiler alert. We're doing a lot of WrestleMania prep. We've got a lot of build up for the big event. WrestleMania X7 may or may not be on our list of the 8 best WrestleManias. I'm not going to confirm whether it is or not. Stay tuned for that.
Right.
Ript, I want to know who you gravitated towards when you first started watching wrestling. Who are some of your favorites?
Rey Mysterio was 100% my favorite growing up. He was just, I've always been the small guy too. I never achieved great heights in that way. I'm just 5'6", and just watching Rey Mysterio be able to do it, it's inspiring as a kid. And that's why, I feel like when you get older, you start to shy away from those more superhero type characters, but they're 100% important in that way, because Rey Mysterio was the first one that I gravitated towards. He was just awesome. He came out shooting out from the entrance ramp and the fireworks going off. And of course he couldn't do that later in his career. But yeah, he was definitely the first one. I just loved watching him. Anytime him and Eddie were in the ring together, I mean, that was just otherworldly watching those two wrestle. So I would say he was the first one for sure that comes to mind. But then as I got older, Chris Jericho, Edge, CM Punk much later, I very much enjoyed these guys because they were very, very good villains and very realistic characters that I enjoyed. So yeah, there's a ton of wrestlers I love, but for starting out, those would be the ones for sure that come to mind.
Ript, I like how you mentioned that Rey Mysterio is a superhero. I believe in his Hall of Fame speech, he thanked everybody for allowing him to be a superhero.
Oh, yeah.
And Chris Jericho is a name that gets thrown around, a guy who has transformed himself over time. But look at Rey Mysterio and his career arc, a guy who's small, who did all the lucha stuff early because he was young and not as injured.
Yeah.
That guy really has transformed himself multiple times again and again over his career. And looking back on last year's WrestleMania, I loved the match with Dominic. Loved that whole story, all the moving parts of that match and the story leading up. I thought they did a great job. You want to talk about? I enjoy a good storyline too, and I thought that was an excellent storyline and story arc last year.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, my light went out. Give me a second.
No problem, man.
No problem.
We're joined by Ript Studwell here on the Card Subject to Change podcast, powered by Low Pies Pizza, built by Durham Remodeling, and colored by Ryan Allison Tattoo, talking storyline arcs and how Rey Mysterio and Dom really put the icing on the cake at last year's Mania.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was the original high flyer. I think a lot of people say that in wrestling. Like he invented it and just put it on the map. And I mean, you go back and watch his early stuff when his knees were not completely shot, essentially. Right. Dude, he was just ridiculous. And there's one spot in the Ray versus Kurt Angle match at SummerSlam 02, which is one of the best matches of all time. It's the best opening match of all time, if I had to put my name in that ringer there. But that spot where he's about to jump out of the ring, but the ref comes over and he's like, no, don't. And then Ray goes back, and then he goes to Kurt Angle. He's like through the middle rope, and then he just flies over. Oh my God, it just looks so crisp. He's so good. It's amazing.
Ript, you mentioned Ray and Eddie when they're in the ring together. I got to give a shout out to Halloween Havoc 97, one of my all-time favorite matches, no matter who it is. Ray and Eddie just knocked it out of the park way back then.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. I know it's not everybody's favorite, but I still think my favorite, now that we're talking about Dominic, is the one at SummerSlam between Ray and Eddie for the custody of Dominic. That story was enrapturing to me when I was a kid. I just loved it. I hated Eddie. Like, he did such a good job. Yes. Normally, I could see like the in-between of it where it was like, oh, this guy's doing a good job. Like, I could always see that. Like, the villain's really good at what he was doing. But like, man, I just hated him. He did such a good job. Like, he was even better than most heels. And the payoff was so good. And just now to see Dominic doing what he's doing too, it's just really cool, because it's like, in a way, it's like you grew up with Dominic Mysterio. Now he's on your TV, and it's just so cool. I love it.
For sure.
Eddie did such a great job as the villain in that role. And then you think of the chubby-cheeked Dominic, wondering who his daddy really was. And then you see him now just out there doing his own thing, shedding his own skin and just being his own character. Dude, he is so much fun to watch. I love watching Dominic.
Yeah, fantastic.
So, Ript, if you could look back, what was the crystallizing moment in your life that said, maybe you say, I want to do this myself? What brought you into becoming a wrestler yourself here?
It was CM Punk shoot promo leading up to Money in the Bank 2011, I want to say.
Yep, you're right.
Yeah, it was I don't know, just something clicked that day. I was like, this is the best thing. I was dealing with, my stepdad dealing with cancer and stuff like that at that time. And just to have that out and just to be able to not have to, I guess, dwell on that was just very cool. It was the first thing that made me feel anything when that was happening. Like I was in a tough spot at that point. I mean, I was, 15, 14, 16, something like that when this was happening. So I was still a kid and I just didn't have any like outlet. I didn't know how to talk about this horrible thing happening to my stepdad, and just to be able to completely be lost in something like that. Cause I'd fallen out of wrestling for a little bit. And around this time was when I came back. It was during like the Shield stuff and Daniel Bryan and the Yes Movement and stuff like that. And CM Punk shoot promo. I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Just something clicked that day when I was watching it for sure.
Talk about how wrestling, you shared there a little bit, but just how great wrestling is as an escape.
Mm-hmm.
I always call wrestling the great uniter because it brings in so many different walks of people of life. You go to a wrestling show and you're going to see a whole cornucopia of different people, ages, races, pay grades, all that type of stuff. It's the great uniter, but it's also a great place to lose yourself and find something to follow and tune in and appointment viewing and look forward to that. You touched on that a little bit, but just talk about that a little bit more about how important that was to you, not just dealing with that, but like throughout your whole life.
Oh, it was everything. Honestly, it was everything because it sounds dramatic, but like, I don't know if I'd even be here right now if it wasn't for stuff like wrestling. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's very hard to envision my life without wrestling making its mark, because I've been open about it. I've dealt with mental health stuff for a long period of my life, and it still crops up every once in a while. But man, especially when my stepdad passed away from cancer, it was like the only thing that made me feel anything, and like just made me feel anything other than just being sad and depressed, and like I just didn't understand the world. And it was great. And that's always been my goal personally with wrestling. If I've been able to do that for anybody, just one person, I feel like I've done my job, because that's what wrestling has meant to me. It's been a very important aspect to my life. And like, my life would be fundamentally different if I did not watch the VHS of WrestleMania X7. I can tell you that.
Now it's come full circle. Now you are part of that environment where you are a wrestler. People come chant for you, lately with the whole James Thomas thing, which we'll get into later. But now you go from being a fan, you're still a fan, by the way, but now you're part of it. What's it like being on the other side of it and seeing all those other people out there that are coming there to be entertained, coming there for an escape, and knowing that you help fill that void for some people?
It's hard to put into words, I think, but it's very strange, to say the least, that like people, as you said, are coming and like chanting my name and, just being overall into what I do, like that's always been something that's hard for me to like do. What I give to the world valuable in any way. That's hard to quantify, but it's just, it's really cool. Like it's very cool, to say the least. And it's just one of those random things where it's like my whole persona idea came from a sitcom I watched. And I'm like, just because I watched a sitcom episode, it's like now I'm at this moment in time where people are chanting my name, and it's just like, it's flattering. And then for a guy like me, it's also quite strange, because, a lot of my life has been telling myself, I don't matter or stuff like that. And it's just, well, apparently I do, you know what I mean? So
sure.
Yeah, it's cool. It's very flattering.
And Nick was reading my mind. That was exactly what I was going to ask. What's it like for you standing in the ring and hearing all these people just chanting "Ript, Ript, Ript"? That's got to elicit some huge emotions for you. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's hard to put into words. It's really cool, because I feel like a lot of people, you just want to leave the world better than you found it. You want to make your mark somehow and be remembered in some way. And it's like, it's really cool to, you know, have people chant my name and to be remembered in some way, even though it's, you know, some really, really goofy concept in a really goofy world. You know, it's just, it's very cool. And like now on the other side of the problems that I was having, I can definitely appreciate a lot more. And it's, yeah, it's just really cool. It's hard to put into words. So I hope that answers the question a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ript, take us back to the origins of how you came up with your character. You said you were watching a sitcom. Give us that origin story on how the birth of Ript Studwell happened.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Workaholics.
I've never seen it, but I remember it being on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's an episode in the first season that the one character, Adam DeMamp, basically he's a small guy. He's not out of shape, you know, but he's a smaller guy, and he basically has this idea because he's dating someone new, and the girlfriend tells him he should be a bodybuilder. And like I remember watching it, the scene with all these just jacked, crazy looking bodybuilders, and that Adam character is just standing there looking small as he normally is with these other characters. And I'm like, you know what? That's really funny. You know, I should do that because I don't have a problem making a joke about myself. Like, it's okay. You know, I've had this discussion recently where it's like, I grew up with 3 brothers, right? 3 older brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I had to get a thick skin pretty early if I was going to survive that. So it's like, I understand how to, you know, take the piss out of myself. Like, it's not a big deal to me at all. So, yeah, I was just like, I'll just go with it. You know, I can't avoid how I look, you know. I've never been one. You know, my dad, he was in good shape, but like, he wasn't ever like jacked or anything like that. So I'm never going to look like the Rock or anything like that. So it's like, why not just lean into it? Why not have some fun with it? And yeah, and then here we are. So it worked out.
I absolutely love. I when we were prepping for the show about a week ago, I asked you to send me a couple of pictures, and the one that I picked, I just love. You're standing there, you got the weights, you just look like you're pumped up to. I love that image that you present, and that story just brings it all together perfectly. Rip, talk about a little bit. So how do you prep during a week where you're going to be in the ring, and then how do you prep yourself the day of? How do you get into Ript Studwell as you're preparing for a match or a segment or a show just overall?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I think this answer is going to be disappointing. It's not like a very a long scale thing for me. I don't know what it is. I've always been able to like click it off and on for some reason. Like, I don't have to get into any specific zone or anything like that. Like, I do it. You know, I've always been really good at separating that, because that's an important part for me. It's like, while I do like performing and while I do like entertaining people, it's not my life at the end of the day. I go home, you know, I work a job just like anybody else. So to be able to, you know, just go out there and do it and have some fun and then, you know, shut it off is pretty cool for me. So I wouldn't say I had like a routine to get into character or anything. I'm not like a method actor like Jared Leto or something like that. So, but yeah, it's pretty easy. I flip it on and off. Like, it's not, unfortunately, that's the only answer I can give you.
No, you said something earlier in a previous answer to a question, Rip, that I really like. You said, you know, you're able to laugh at yourself. How much of that is what makes people successful in pro wrestling? I mean, let's face it, you know, pro wrestling kind of gets laughed at by people that are outside of it, that people that don't get the big picture. But you're able to sit there and laugh at yourself about it. How big of a deal is that, you know, for you and other people, that you and other wrestlers, other performers that are wrestling, to be able to step back and just laugh at themselves a little bit and realize what the big picture is?
Yeah, I think it's good if you have that characteristic, because I've seen a lot of guys that, you know, can't laugh at themselves or are pretty selfish. And that's one of the great things about SCW that I think everybody realizes. You know, they're a part of this part of the show, or like part of the machine or whatever, in a certain way. And I think it is very important to be able to do it, because you can look at a lot of the, you know, best wrestlers of all time, and like, I think all of them have been able to do that. You know, Kurt Angle's a big one. I mean, he came out in a milk truck for God's sake, you know, like,
He wore a headgear with a wig. For
Yeah,
crying
yeah.
out loud.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like
The
Big
tiny
Show-
cowboy hat.
right. Yeah. And then like Big Show was able to laugh at himself. He had an amazing career. He's still having an amazing career, if I'm not mistaken, too. I'm pretty sure he's still wrestling in AEW. I could be wrong. I haven't really kept up with AEW, but Edge had fun, that whole angle with Kurt Angle was great, So yeah, I think it is very important, because The Miz is another great one too. I love bringing him up because he doesn't get enough credit for what he does. He is insanely funny and he doesn't take himself seriously. And, he's been their best heel for like 2 decades now. So yeah, I think it's a very important trait to have. And I think a lot of the best wrestlers have done it. So I think the proof is there.
Ript, our friend Brandon the Shank Eubanks says Ript needs to make a stop in Absolute Pro Wrestling. So you're definitely wanted an APW, and I guarantee that crowd would eat you up. They would love Ript Studwell.
That sounds in a good way. Yeah. I'll definitely have to make a stop there sometime for sure.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Are you okay?
Ript, let me, Nick. I just lost my train of thought again. Every show for the last couple of weeks, I've derailed.
I'll go back. Ript, we had you booked prior a few months back, and you had taken some time away from wrestling. Talk about how wrestling affected you during that time, and what made you brought you back to wrestling. What was the turning point to bring you back into the forefront and into this current feud with primetime James Thomas?
Yeah, so I think it was last April. I had a after match thing with Mason Beck, and I landed wrong on his one move, and I just had a really bad concussion. And I took a month off after that. Like I didn't wrestle at all, but that wasn't enough time. It just wasn't, looking back on it, because at the time I thought it was anxiety, and I think it was still both, right? Like it was both of those things combining, because you get a head injury and you're dealing with mental health, that's going to compound things. But
sure.
Yeah, I don't think the concussion was properly healed. Like I got back into the ring about a little over a month later. I did an outdoor show in Bluegrass, and I didn't want to be there. I didn't like wrestling at that time. And that had been going on for a little while. I didn't understand my own relationship with wrestling, because I still was kind of in the mindset of like, oh, I could still make this a career, I could still do that. And, I've definitely gotten into a different spot with it where it's like, it's not my career. It's not what makes me who I am. And I think that was the other thing too. I was having a pretty strong like identity crisis at that time. I feel like my whole life, as dramatic as this sounds, kind of came to a head at that moment. Those last several months in wrestling. And then in September, when I had my last show and anniversary, I just needed to get away, and I needed to find out what made me enjoy wrestling again. Like right now, when we were talking about what I loved about wrestling, I would have not had the same response if we had the interview a long time ago, because I would have been definitely more hateful about wrestling, because there were just so many aspects of it that I just was not enjoying. I know this contradicts what I said earlier, but having a sense of humor about myself, I feel like that was all like people in life saw about me. I just felt like I was just constantly being like a comedy guy, not only in the ring, but like in real life too. Like I didn't feel like people understood that I was more than just a person to make you laugh, and that was really hard for me to deal with, because it's like, is that really my only value to the world? I don't think it is at the end of the day, but yeah, it was a lot of things came together, and I was so unhappy. And I think looking back on, the concussion had a huge part in that too, because there was a time late mid-December where it just kind of lifted, like that entire haze of the concussion. And I felt a lot better. And that's actually, funnily enough, Merrick Brave, the one who promotes and runs SCW, great guy. He actually, like, I kid you not, like a week after that happened, he reached out to me and he was like, hey, I just want to see how you were feeling and if you were thinking about coming back. And I was like, that's perfect timing, because I was thinking about coming back at that point, because I was starting to get back into what I enjoyed about wrestling, what I liked about it. I would watch wrestling willingly, because I just wasn't watching wrestling unless it was just on in the room I walked in. So, I was starting to find the love of it again. And I just, I missed it at the end of the day. I missed being in front of a crowd. I do enjoy performing, which is, again, is one of those things that, like, being a shy kid, I'm still pretty shy, but like much more shy growing up. Say that I really enjoy performing is kind of crazy. I never thought I would see that day, but I really do love performing. There's a certain aspect of it, to be able to plan something and then go out and do that thing and then get the reaction you want. It's very rewarding. So it's definitely something I missed, and it was a hole in my life. So yeah.
So it sounds like everything just came together at the right time for your return.
Mhm.
I'm glad that you were willing and able to open up about that, because I know a lot of people, myself included, do struggle with things like anxiety, and maybe not a concussion for someone who's not an athlete, but struggle with a lot of mental aspects. And I really am glad you touched on that, because I think hearing your story could help other people who are watching the podcast. I love that we're able to share stuff like that. It kind of makes me think of Dustin Mosley, who shared some of his personal life with us a few months ago.
Yeah.
That's one thing, wrestling is, to me, because I've been a part of SCW as a ring announcer 10 or so years ago. I'm a fan. We've got this podcast. Wrestling is just one big family.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice that we can all be here for each other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And wrestling is cathartic too. Like you said, some people seek it out to get away from the normal everyday bumps and grinds of life, or whatever's going on. I want to thank you for sharing your story. I also want to selfishly say I'm so glad you're back. You're definitely one of the highlights of the show for me. I love coming out and seeing what Ript Studwell is going to do that night. So I'm glad that you were able to get yourself back to where you needed it to be back in front of the crowd, be back in front of the audience. Love having Ript Studwell back out there.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me. Yeah, I wanted to circle back to that point you brought up, Chris, where sharing the story does help. And I think that was one thing I had to realize too. Like, I kept a lot of stuff in, and it's like, well, there's a usefulness for me to let it out at the end of the day. So I'm hoping it can help other people, because during that time, I read stories about baseball players who were dealing with anxiety and stuff too. Daniel Bard was the big one. He's the Rockies closer last I checked. And yeah, it was nice to see that, like, I can stop, right? And I can come back whenever I'm ready, And the response was great to it as well. Like, because I closed off. I didn't really say why I was leaving too much. I gave kind of a vague answer to a lot of people. But then when, people started realizing, there were a lot of people that were very kind to me, very helpful. Merrick Brave, Johnny Wisdom, Chris Angle, the one referee. There were just so many people that, it was overwhelming in a good way, right? Like, I just didn't expect it, because try as we may, I feel like mental health, while we've taken a lot of good steps, I just still don't feel like it's really there where we need it to be. And like, I feel like a lot of men specifically keep it in, because it's not something that's talked about. You just have to kind of work through it. You have to just keep going, and then one day it'll get better. And it's just like, that's just not how it works. Unfortunately, you have to confront it. You have to stop. And I'm thankful that I did, because now I'm in a much better place. So I appreciate you guys. I'm sorry. I appreciate you guys letting me talk about it on here.
No, we're so glad you did, because you're right. Mental health does have a stigma around it.
Yeah,
I was just going to say the same thing.
If it's men's, and we should not shy away from those conversations. We should have those conversations, because the person that maybe is having that conversation isn't necessarily the person. Maybe someone else is needing to hear that. That one person's needing to get it out, but there's somebody out there that needs to hear that as well. And it's reassuring, and we need to do what we can as men, talking about, as mature men, talking about this to erase that stigma, because everybody's dealing with something one way or another, and
absolutely,
and what they're dealing with and how they're dealing with it may be able to help you get out of how you're dealing with your situation. So yeah, we got to erase that stigma.
For sure. I agree 100%.
Well, gentlemen, I think that's a good note to take a quick pause on, pay some business dues, take care of a few things. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We got more to talk about with Ript Studwell. We're going to talk about more in depth on his big comeback. On the other side of the break, we will have our moment of focus. But we will be back in just a moment here.
All right.
Football season may be over, but for frequency's sake, still has you covered for all your sporting needs. Tune in every Sunday when the best professional wrestling podcast around, Cards Subject to Change, gets you caught up on everything inside the ropes. They won't miss a count with weekly analysis and interviews. More into auto racing? We've got a double dose for you on the track. Tune in to Fast Money with Rod Villagomez each week and win some money with the quickest bets in all of sports. Want more insight from Pit Row? Check out the Green, White, and Checkered podcast where they give their insight on everything happening on and off the track. Need your basketball fix? Points in the Paint has you covered with live shows every other week looking at everything in the association. Backed by popular demand, we have the return of The Payoff Pitch, FFSQC's baseball show, covering you on news around the MLB. If you're missing football, don't fret. Mark and Dan still have you covered in the football lounge. Missing Joe Winkle? Probably not, but he's still here talking sports on Educated Ignorance. Football season might be over, but we've still got you covered. For frequency's sake, you know what we mean.
For Frequency's Sake is brought to you by Durham Remodeling, serving the Quad City area's remodeling and repair needs since 1973. Clint's Draft House, grab a bite and a pint. 7th Street Moline. Lopez, New York-style pizza served up by the slice or pie, Davenport. Lifted Energy, energy drinks, coffee, donuts, and more. #GetLifted. Atomic Sports Cards and Collectibles. Sports cards and memorabilia, vintage clothing, hats, pennants, and more. Ryan Allison Tattoo. Step into the vibrant world of tattoos with Ryan Allison. And A Cut Above, offering quality custom woodwork designed specifically around our customers.
Welcome back to the show. You are tuned in to Cards Subject to Change. We are powered by Lopez Pizza, built by Durham Remodeling, colored by Ryan Allison Tattoos. We've got Ript Studwell in the studio today. Before we get back to Ript, we do have a little more business to take care of. Just want to briefly talk about the 3rd annual Sandra Lee Memorial Car Show that's coming up on May the 4th this year. This is a charity event. Proceeds go to the Autism Society of the Quad Cities. More importantly, if you are a wrestling fan, you are going to want to be there. Donations of at least $5 are encouraged, but you will get to see the likes of Coco Beware, Cowboy Bob Orton, Fred Ottman, better known as Tugboat, or the Shockmaster if you're a WCW fan. And you can climb aboard the Ho Train, if you will, to see The Godfather. There are a couple of others, Independent Star, Luke Graham Jr., the original Glow Girl, Hollywood. Like I said, all the proceeds go to the Autism Society of the Quad Cities. They are also selling 12 by 12 posters. There will only be 50 of those. And you can get into a raffle for a Pepsi pedal car for just $1. So stop by the Rock Island County Fairgrounds May the 4th. This is a great charity event. If you're into cars, if you're into wrestling, this is going to be fantastic. Right now, since we're coming back from break, Nick, Ript, I think we need to just take a moment to focus. Be back after the moment of focus with JT Energy.
Welcome to week 5 of A Moment of Focus with the feline phenom, JT Energy. And this week, I think we should focus on letting go. Because the past, it can come back to haunt you. It really can. It's always just right over your shoulder. And I think it's fitting that with your guest, Ript Studwell, being involved with someone that haunts your past is something that you need to let go of. You need to find your way to make your past go away and have your future be what's in front of you and be what's important and be what you focus on. This has been A Moment of Focus with the feline phenom, JT Energy.
JT there with some words of wisdom, a moment of focus, of course, letting go. Ript, I have no doubt you can let go of the past and be able to build on the future, but I believe your current problem you have in SCWPro right now, James Thomas has got a hard time of letting go of the past. Can you talk about currently what's going on in your run in SCW and what's been going on with you and James Thomas as you guys have had a few face-to-face encounters recently?
Yeah, so when I came back at the Rumble, James Thomas was on top, and I distracted him, and he was thrown over the top rope. So I cost him that opportunity, and costed him another one later. And ever since then, I've been barred from the arena. So a masked man has been coming around and destroying more James Thomas opportunities. So yeah, and coming up at Wildwood, James Thomas has invited me out to have a discussion about the future because he is currently losing his mind. So that'll be a good time.
And I'm worried about exactly where that discussion is going to go because James Thomas has been carrying around a mallet the last couple of times I've seen him. So I hope that doesn't come into play. Yeah. I hope it is just a discussion, but do watch your back with that hammer that he's toting around there.
I will.
We're joined by Ript Studwell here on the Card Subject to Change podcast, powered by Low Pies Pizza, built by Durham Remodeling, and colored by Ryan Allison Tattoo. And Ript, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about your life a little bit away from wrestling and your love of writing. You're a published author.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what it was like to get something published and your love of writing, and I'm sure that still continues to this day.
Yeah, it was really cool when I got published, for sure. It was a surreal feeling to hold your own work in your hands.
Yeah.
And just to feel the pages, because I've read thousands of books at this point in my life. I've read so much, so it's cool to be able to hold my own work. But yeah, just my love of writing's always been there. I got into reading really big when the Iron Man movie came out in 2008, if you can believe it, because I wasn't a huge reader. I was more of a sports kid, honestly. I played baseball, I played basketball, but when Iron Man came out, I was like, I have to read some more Iron Man because that was amazing. Like, I just love that story so much. And then I read comic books, and then I got more into books, and now I'm reading both. I have a stack of books to my right here that I plan to read here shortly. So yeah, and writing's always been something that I've enjoyed a lot because I didn't get serious about it until I was much older, but I would always write stuff for school, and the teachers were always like, yeah, this is pretty good. Keep it up. And, like when you're a kid, I feel like this is another thing I feel like I miss the mark on with a lot of people. Like, people don't think it's that big of a deal when kids are told certain things, but you remember so much when you're a kid. I still remember my 6th grade teacher telling me how great my writing was. And if it wasn't for something like that, I probably wouldn't be writing today. So, yeah, it's really fun writing. I just like taking a crazy concept and just making it about life, because a lot of them are, science fiction, but they're rooted in like mental health and stuff like that. And yeah, it's a lot of fun writing. I actually started a story yesterday that I'm really excited about because I read Descender from Jeff Lemire, which is a graphic novel collection. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it or if anybody watching is. I highly recommend it. It was one of the best sci-fi things I've ever read in my life. But yeah, that inspired something that I want to write. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I very much enjoy writing now that I'm getting back into it, because I was having problems with that too, with the concussion as well. But now that everything's lifted, I'm definitely more excited about that too, which is really cool. Yeah.
Are there similar parallels to your wrestling career and how you express yourself as Ript Studwell, and then your writing career and how you express yourself as being an author of what you're trying to write at that time? Is there similarities in that?
I think it's equal parts of myself. I think it's different. I'm having more fun with wrestling and just feeling the crowd and stuff like that. And writing, it's just a way to like release a lot of the more complex emotions that are much harder to do for professional wrestling because
Sure.
I could try to do the concepts that I do in my sci-fi books, but I don't think they'd reach because it would take too much time. I don't want to do a 30-minute promo where I'm trying to describe this concept. It's like we have matches to get to, guys. So yeah, it's it's just different for myself at the end of the day. But yeah, it's definitely expressive and in both ways. I'm able to let out, more like frustration and like anger and more of those higher end emotions, and it's more like the lower end emotions on writing and stuff like that. So definitely the same but different in a way.
And Nick brought up earlier that wrestling is cathartic. I know from experience writing can be cathartic as well as reading. I haven't written anything in probably 10 years, but I used to pretend like I was a writer. I have trouble finishing things, so I would lose motivation. That's neither here nor there. But so you talked about like sci-fi. Is that the genre you gravitate towards when you read and when you write usually?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm a huge fan of science fiction. Philip K. Dick's one of my favorites. Or no, he is my favorite. Yeah.
Ender's Game, right?
Oh no, that's
Orson Scott Card.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite series.
Yeah. I actually still got to read that one. I'm still not caught up with Ender's Game, but I have it. I want to read it here shortly.
Philip K. Dick is Blade Runner, correct?
Yes, that's the one. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, he did that
Android's
one.
Dream of Electric Sheep.
Yeah. Yeah. it's a mouthful of a title for the book, but
it is. It really is.
Yeah. But yeah, that one, Ubik, is amazing. I Scanner Darkly is a really good one too. So
yes,
yeah, like sci-fi is definitely sci-fi and like speculative fiction, because speculative fiction is more like, it doesn't have to be like about science. It just has to speculate on things in life. So like Matt Haig is really good with that. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Midnight Library at all. He did that one, and that's speculative fiction. So it's usually that, because as much as I like science. Oh, Robert A. Heinlein's another one too. I totally forgot about him. But yeah, like the harder sci-fi stuff is it's not that fun, because, if I wanted to read a science textbook, I'd read a science textbook. So it's like, that's right. I usually try to get like speculative fiction with these elements into it. So I definitely gravitate towards that, because it's, at the end of the day, it's still entertainment, right? I'm not entertained by, science stuff. I mean, it's neat, but like the only one I've been captivated by was Jurassic Park, the Michael Crichton novel. That one is great because I could read about dinosaurs all day. I love dinosaurs. So, but yeah, that's like a very special case. But yeah, I definitely gravitate towards that. It's my favorite. It's either that or I'll read like autobiographies and stuff. Like baseball biographies are probably my number two, because I am a huge baseball fan. So I love reading those stories.
So, Ript, where we're talking about your writing, if we're interested in your work, where can we find you? Where can we pick up copies of what you've written?
Well, thank you for bringing that up. It's on Amazon. So if you type in, I have one book, which is a collection of stories called In Worlds Alone. And my writer name is Daniel Drake. So if you type that in, you should be able to find it. You'd probably have to type the whole thing though, since it's, not like a hugely popular work. So it's not like you'll find it just by the title or just by my name. So you probably have to type it together, but I have that one. And then I have The Final Era, which is also on Amazon. So yeah, they're all on there. They're about $8 to $10. It's been a while since I've checked the prices, but they're around that. So they're affordable, which is what I try to keep it at, because, I'll still make, somewhat of a profit, but that's not really the point for me. I do it because I enjoy it. And, like I'm a big comic book guy too. So like Image Comics always did like the first graphic novel was $10. And because of that, I found so many good stories. So I like that price point. So people can pick up my book and it's like, oh, this is cheap. And it's like, if I don't like it, it's whatever. And if I do, then you get another great story down the road. So
you talked about picking up your book and feeling the pages and being able to flip it in your hands. How cool is it to go to Amazon and see your work up there? I mean, that's got to be cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. Yeah, it's awesome. Again, it's just one of those crazy life things that, it's hard for yourself to take stock of your own life, and like how much of a mark you made, but like seeing tangible things like your own work on Amazon is just, that's awesome.
I want to talk about another aspect of your life outside of wrestling. You are a fellow podcaster, if I'm not mistaken. Talk about your podcast a little bit.
Yeah, funnily enough, I actually came from it about an hour ago at this point. Well, an hour from 2:30 when we started. So me and Maria, which she's better known as Valentina Loca, she used to wrestle, but she had a pretty bad neck injury. So she had to stop at the end of last year, start of this year, somewhere around that time.
Yep.
And yeah, we it's called Music Maria and also Drake. I came up with the title. I was really happy with that one because I'm just like, thank you. Yeah, because it's like Music and Maria, they both have M's, and it's like it could be a nice alliteration, but then I'm just there, so it's but yeah, at the for our podcast, we just talk about music because she's a big rap fan. I'm a big heavy metal rock fan, and we give each other an album each week, and it's a lot of fun because I don't have a lot of people. I feel like it's the same for everybody. We give each other music, but then, life gets in the way, so we don't have time to listen to it. So to be able to, have such a regimented schedule and we'll talk about this one next week makes us have to listen to new things, broaden our horizons. And it's a good time. And it's just fun to be able to hand stuff off that I enjoy so much, albums that I've loved for several years, and to give it to someone else and to see if they enjoy it as much as I do. So it's a really good time. If people ever get a chance to listen to it, it's definitely just for fun.
Yeah, I've had a chance. It's been a while since I've listened to an episode, but I have tuned in. You guys do great work.
Thank you.
I'm excited to delve in a little more. Just my podcast regimen is not what it used to be since I'm not traveling anymore. That was my go-to when I was working my previous job. I would be traveling hours away, multiple days of the week. So music and podcasts.
Yeah, that's what fills the gap for sure. It's hard when you're not driving to find time to listen to this stuff because that's what you do. I feel like most adults just listen to stuff when they're driving, so it's hard.
We're talking here with Ript Studwell on the Card Subject to Change podcast, the podcast by the fan for the fan, powered by Lopez Pizza, built by Durham Remodeling, colored by Ryan Allison Tattoo. We're going to jump back into the squared circle here with Ript Studwell. And you talked about how WrestleMania X7 was big for you, got you hooked. What currently are you watching? What do you watch? Do you watch, episodic weekly wrestling, or what do you watch, or what do you go out of your way to watch, or what has your interest in the current era, current storylines and stuff?
So I try to watch when I can, but as we mentioned, we're busy as adults, and I have so many other things going on right now, so it's kind of hard for me to sit down and watch the weekly episodes. But I do my best to sit down and watch the pay-per-views every month. I'm definitely just a WWE guy. I've tried AEW so many times. It's not for me at the end of the day. It's super technical, and it's just a lot of moves and stuff, and that's just not what I get into, personally speaking, for wrestling. So more power to everybody else who enjoys it. But yeah, so I'm definitely just a WWE guy. But I mean, right now, we talked about it already, but the best thing going is the Judgment Day with Dominic Mysterio. I would go to bat against anybody about that. They're doing everything right in terms of wrestling and storytelling. And I mean, I just watched the Elimination Chamber the day after because it was in Australia, so I wasn't staying up that late.
Sure.
But I watched it the day after, and that match that Finn Balor and Priest had against I don't remember their new tag name, but it's Tyler.
It was Tyler Bate and Pete Dunne.
Yeah.
New Catch Republic.
The New Catch Republic.
New Catch Republic, yeah. So I watched that match, and I was blown away. That was my favorite match of the whole card. And I'm sure a lot of people would say it was one of the chambers, but I'm like, no.
I love that match too.
Yeah, and I'm a huge tag wrestling fan too, so that helps out a little bit. Yes. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's just they're doing everything so well in that ring. Gunther's great. I love watching Gunther. He is a throwback. He's so believable, and that's the thing you try to get in professional wrestling's believability. And I feel like as cool as a lot of the pretty moves look, they don't look believable or authentic a lot of times. And it's you get a guy like Gunther in there, or a guy like Sheamus, and they're just absolutely pulverizing each other. And I'm like, yeah, this is a blast. I'm enjoying it a lot. So yeah, there's still some great stuff. Oh, Jey Uso is great. I love Jey Uso so much right now. He's one of my favorites. I'm super excited because, on the personal end of things, being able to wrestle your brother at WrestleMania, I mean,
Wow.
that's got to be the coolest thing ever, right? Like,
Oh, for sure.
yeah, like I'm so excited for that match. I think it's going to be maybe the best match of WrestleMania weekend, which is probably a hot take, but I'll stand on that hill because I'm excited for the Rock stuff too. But man, Jimmy and Jay have been my absolute. I mean, they've been my favorite tag team for a while, and just to see them at this moment, and then what it was last year, the WrestleMania before, they main evented with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens too.
Amazing match.
Yeah, again, just for like a tag wrestling guy like me and you,
Yep.
to see that match in the main event, it's like that's just so cool. I love it.
You stole my he stole my
go ahead,
questions. I was going to ask what he was most excited for. It's WrestleMania season. What are you most excited for? But you answered it with the Jimmy and Jay Uso match. I think a lot of people are excited to see what we're going to do.
So good. This is shaping up to be one of the best WrestleManias ever. I think there's a lot
By
of good
far.
stuff. Yeah, because I mean that tag match on night one with The Rock and Roman versus
so much is going to happen in that match. I mean, just worlds are colliding. There's so much going on. It's going to be great.
Yeah, and that goes back to the one point that I brought up about like storytelling and why it's so important. And you know, if that was just a tag match, I wouldn't really care. But there's so many threads going into that match, and it's gonna be so good. I can't wait. It's gonna be great.
Me too.
Yeah.
Can I just say that WWE has been on fire, in my opinion, since right around WrestleMania 38 and moving into today. I mean, Cody's return, the build up to 39, and just everything that they've done.
I would even step on your toes and say Royal Rumble of last year. Do you remember the whole Sammy and Roman thing? That was Royal Rumble last year. I thought they were on fire. So it's been close to 2 years that they've been really plugging away and just pumping out great stuff.
Yeah.
So, Ript, I want to before we get you off the hook, I want to play a little fantasy booking with you.
Okay.
My first question, whenever we play fantasy booking, if there is any wrestler that you could step in the ring with, past or present, dead or alive, who's obviously not stepping in the ring while they're dead, but past or present, who would you want to face in the ring?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it would probably be Edge. I think it would be. He was probably my favorite for the longest. He's still one of my favorites. I love watching him wrestle. And just on like a personal note, he comes out to Alter Bridge, which is my favorite band of all time.
Awesome.
I knew about them before he took the theme on Metalingus. So it was just a really cool moment when he came out with it 1 week on Raw. I was like, this is great. Like it just made me fall in love with his character and his work even more. So yeah, I've oftentimes like wanted to come out to Alter Bridge myself, and he also comes out to Alter Bridge and stuff like that. It would just be really cool because I know that actually did happen finally because the Judgment Day uses the other side from Alter Bridge when they come out as a group. And I think it was Clash at the Castle. It was just really cool to have two wrestlers and groups come out to Alter Bridge. I'm like, this is heaven. They're the best band of all time.
Is there a storyline that's happened in wrestling that you would interject yourself into to either improve or just be a part of as a whole?
I don't think so. No. Because I've seen a lot of great stories, of course, but like they're great stories because of every part that's there, if that makes sense. And like if I'm, interjected into it, I don't think I would do enough to improve it, I guess, at the end of the day.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I like that answer.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, Ript, we want to thank you so much for spending your time. I know you've got family coming into town and making time for us. We're very appreciative that you're on here. We wanted you a while back, but the wait was worth the wait was worth it to get you on here at this time. And we're so happy that you're on here. And we're able to take time out of the show or take time out of your day and your busy schedule to be on with us.
Oh yeah, it was my pleasure. I'm glad you guys waited out and got me on here because I was wanting to. I'm glad we finally got to. This was a really good time. I don't typically do a lot of podcasts, so this is a really fun one. I'm glad to have been on.
We had a lot of fun talking to you, and by all means, if you ever want to come back, our door's open.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to.
We're Ript Studwell fans here. We're unabashedly. We're not going to keep it quiet. We are Ript Studwell fans here.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. That means a
100%.
lot. Yeah. It's very cool. Thank you.
Well, Nick, that's gonna put a bow on this episode, I think. But we got big things coming up. We have 5 episodes coming up next week. We're gonna have Tim Regal on next Sunday, talking all things independent wrestling for WrestleMania weekend. We've got an all-star for frequency's sake panel show coming up on Wednesday, building into WrestleMania.
Yep.
We're going to talk about Stand and Deliver Saturday afternoon of WrestleMania weekend. We're going to recap night 1 immediately following night 1 of WrestleMania.
Special late night edition. Special late night edition of Card Subject Change.
And then we are talking night 2 and the Raw after WrestleMania the following Tuesday. And that's just the first week in April. We've got so much more on our plate the rest of the month. I'm just going to throw a name that I could throw 3 names out there, but I'm going to throw one out as a teaser. Connor Hopkins.
Yeah, we've got Connor Hopkins coming up.
Great.
It's part of them Dem Coyotes. He's the briefcase holder for Good as Gold, Dreamwave Wrestling. He will be on here in the future. We're looking forward to it. But first, we've got to get through WrestleMania. If you're a wrestling fan, it's the most wonderful time of the year, and we're all ready for it, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I'm excited. I'm excited that we had Ript Studwell on. It was a great talk. For Ript Studwell, for my tag team partner, Never Wrong Nick Bull, I am the Wizard CZ. We appreciate you tuning in to Card Subject to Change. Again, we are powered by Lopez, built by Durham Remodeling, and colored by Ryan Allison Tattoo. We will see you next week and throughout the week for WrestleMania. You guys have a good rest of your weekend, and thanks so much for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.